The grand hall of the alien ship was huge and dark. It was called the Star Sovereign. The walls were made of a black, shiny stone that reflected the light. Blue lines of energy pulsed through them like veins, giving the room a cold, eerie glow. Two humans stood in the middle of the hall. Their names were Min and Jean. Min was a diplomat. His job was to talk and make deals. He wore a neat, dark gray suit. He smiled at the tall alien in front of them, but his hands were clasped tightly behind his back. He was nervous. Jean stood beside him. She was quieter. She wore simple, comfortable clothes, the kind an engineer might wear. She did not smile. Her eyes moved slowly around the room. She looked at the alien guards by the doors. She noted how they stood, where their weapons were pointed. She looked at the structure of the ceiling. Her mind was calm, her face peaceful. But behind her eyes, she was working. She was always watching, always learning. The alien in front of them was Ambassador Forlac. He was from the Zorvax collective. He was very tall and thin, with skin like silver fish scales. His head was long, and his black eyes were like shiny stones. He did not blink. "Your proposed list of resources is acceptable," Forlac said. His voice was a dry, rustling sound, like stones sliding down a hill. He waved a long, three-fingered hand. The gesture was dismissive. "The minerals from your asteroid belts will be useful." "Thank you, Ambassador," Min said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "We are happy to be trading with the Zorvax collective. We also believe there is great value in cooperation. That is why we have proposed a joint security force for the border regions. Our people can learn from each other." Forlac made a soft hissing sound. It might have been a laugh. "Your proposal for a joint security force is quaint. It is the thinking of a young species. The Zorvax warrior code is the pinnacle of galactic combat. Cannot be learned. It is in our blood." Min's smile tightened. "With all due respect, Ambassador, humanity has a long and varied history of warfare. I am sure we have things to teach, as well as to learn. We have reviewed your historical data," Forlac stated, his voice flat. "Your species relies entirely on tools. Your soldiers are nothing without their guns, their ships, their bombs. You use technology as a crutch." He leaned forward slightly, his black eyes fixed on Min. "It is a proven fact, a simple truth of the galaxy. Humans cannot fight unarmed. Without your tools, you are soft. You are vulnerable. You have no true strength." Min felt a flush of anger, but he pushed it down. Diplomacy was about control. "That is a very broad statement. Our history might surprise you. Surprise is a symptom of poor intelligence." Forlac replied without hesitation. "We do not rely on it. We know. Look there." He pointed across the hall. Standing near the wall, almost a part of the shadows, was another Zorvax. But this one was nothing like the slender Forlac. This one was a mountain of muscle. His skin was a thick green hide, like a reptile's. He was easily 3 times the mass of a large human. His arms were as thick as Jin's waist. He stood perfectly still, his massive arms crossed over his chest. This was Kale, the champion of the Zorvax. "Kale embodies true strength," Forlac said, a note of pride in his rasping voice. "Pure physical power. Unarmed, he is unstoppable. He has never been defeated. This is what real power looks like. Not ideas in a treaty. Not tools in your hands. This." Jin's eyes moved from the ambassador to the champion. Kale's gaze was fixed on the two humans. It was not a look of hatred or even curiosity. It was a look of pure, simple disregard. He looked at them the way a person looks at a piece of furniture. They were not important. They were not a threat. Jean met his gaze. She did not look away quickly. She did not show fear. She simply looked back. She saw the arrogance in his posture. He stood with his chest out, his shoulders back, believing his size was enough to win any fight. She saw how he placed his weight heavily on his back foot. She saw the way his hands were curled, ready to grab and crush. He was a creature of pure offense, with no thought for defense. He had never needed it. She saw all of this in a few seconds. Then, she looked back at the floor, her face calm. She said nothing. Words were Min's job. Her job was to observe. Min cleared his throat. He is very impressive, Ambassador. But strength comes in many forms. Human ingenuity is a myth you tell yourselves, Forlac interrupted. When a Zorvax is cornered, it becomes more dangerous. Its claws are sharp. Its muscles are strong. When a human is cornered without a weapon, it is simply prey. This is not an insult. It is a biological fact. The silence in the hall felt heavy. The blue light seemed to pulse slower. Min was struggling to find the right words, the diplomatic words that could salvage the situation without accepting this gross insult to all of humanity. Jean remained silent. She could feel the weight of the champion's stare on her again. She ignored it. She thought about the principles she had spent years learning and teaching: leverage, balance, speed, using an opponent's strength against them. Concepts that were meaningless to a being who had only ever known one kind of strength. His own. Forlac looked from Min's frustrated face to Jin's peaceful one. He misinterpreted her silence. The small female understands, he hissed. She does not waste her breath on foolish arguments. She knows the truth when she hears it. She is wise to be silent. Jean finally looked up at Forlac. Her expression did not change. But inside, a small cold spark had been lit. They saw silence as weakness. They saw a lack of bulk as helplessness. They had built their entire worldview on an idea that was about to be shattered. But for now, she simply nodded, a tiny, almost invisible motion. The meeting was over. The first move had been made. The Zorvax had declared humanity weak. And they had no idea that the quiet woman in the room was the one who would prove them wrong. The Zorvax led them from the grand hall into another part of the ship. This new room was a wide circle with tiers of seats looking down on a central floor. The floor was made of a soft, giving material that absorbed sound. This was a training amphitheater. The air smelled strange, like metal and something sour. This is where we hone our strength, Ambassador Forlac said, his voice echoing in the space. We will provide a cultural demonstration, so you can understand what true power looks like. Min and Jean stood near the edge of the circle. Zorvax soldiers filled the seats above, their chittering voices creating a constant, low buzz. Kale, the champion, walked to the center of the floor. He moved with a slow, heavy confidence. A panel on the wall slid open. 3 floating machines like large metal insects zoomed into the arena. They were drones, training drones. They had glowing red eyes and blunt arms designed for combat practice. The drones attacked. They moved fast, striking at Kale from different directions. A human would have tried to dodge to avoid the hits. Kale did not. He stood his ground. When a drone swung a metal limb at his head, he caught it in his hand. His fingers, thick and powerful, closed around the metal. There was a loud crunching sound. He ripped the arm clean off the drone and threw the broken machine against the wall. Another drone tried to grab him from behind. Kale simply leaned forward, reached over his own shoulder, seized the drone, and slammed it down onto the floor in front of him. He stomped on it with one heavy foot, and it shattered into pieces. The third drone hovered, its red eyes blinking. Kale bent his knees and then jumped. It was not a high jump, but it was incredibly powerful. He grabbed the drone out of the air, pulled it close, and crushed it against his chest. Wires and metal fragments fell to the floor. The whole fight lasted less than a minute. Kale was not even breathing heavily. He stood amidst the wreckage, his green hide unmarked. The Zorvax soldiers in the seats above clapped their hands and stamped their feet, making a loud, approving noise. Ambassador Forlac turned to Min and Jean. His expression was smug. You see, this is true power. Unadulterated. It is simple. It is pure. Your species, with your complicated machines and your delicate bodies, could not comprehend it. Min had watched the display with a growing feeling of dread. The raw power was undeniable. He knew he had to say something to defend humanity. He was a diplomat. Words were his weapon. Combat isn't just about power, Ambassador, Min said, trying to keep his voice steady. It's about technique. It's about leverage. It's about speed. A smaller, faster opponent can defeat a larger one. Forlac made that hissing laugh again. Leverage? Speed? These are words used by the weak to explain their weakness. They are excuses. In the end, power decides everything. It was then that Kale himself spoke. His voice was a deep rumble, like faraway thunder. It vibrated in their chests. He had walked over to them, his shadow falling over Min and Jean. He looked down at them, his small, dark eyes full of contempt. The small one has been silent, Kale boomed, looking directly at Jean. The male speaks many words, but she says nothing. Does she not have a voice? Or is she simply wise enough to know fear? All the eyes in the amphitheater turned to Jean. The chittering stopped. The room became very quiet. Min looked at his friend, his face full of worry. He was about to speak for her, to protect her. But Jean spoke first. Her voice was calm and clear. It did not shake. It was not loud, but it carried across the silent room. Humanity comprehends many things, she said. She was not looking at Min or Forlac. She was looking right at Kale, her gaze steady and fearless. We comprehend that the biggest target is often the easiest to hit. A wave of shocked silence swept through the amphitheater. For a moment, no one moved. No one made a sound. The Zorvax soldiers stared, their mouths slightly open. They could not believe what they had just heard. This tiny, soft creature had just insulted their champion. Min felt his heart drop. This was a disaster. This could end the trade deal. Could start an incident. Kale's face twisted. It was the first real emotion he had shown. It was not anger, not yet. It was pure, unadulterated surprise. Then, the surprise turned into a low, guttural sound. It was a laugh, but it was not a happy sound. It was the sound of a predator who has just seen its prey stand up and talk back. He took a step closer, looming over Jean. You speak like a warrior, little creature, he rumbled. But can you back your words? Or do you only have a sharp tongue? Jean did not step back. She did not look away. She simply stood there, a small, still figure in the shadow of the giant. She had thrown a stone into a pond, and now she was waiting to see the ripples. The challenge had been made. It was no longer about minerals or trade agreements. It was about something much simpler and much more dangerous. It was about pride. The silence in the amphitheater was heavy and complete. Every Zorvax soldier was staring at the small human woman who had just insulted their greatest warrior. Ambassador Forlac was the first to break the quiet. His scaly face showed a new emotion. Sharp, calculating interest. He saw an opportunity. A wager, Forlac said, his rustling voice cutting through the air. Let us have a true demonstration. A contest of your claimed technique against our proven strength. Min felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Ambassador, that is not necessary. We are here as diplomats, not gladiators. But your companion speaks like a gladiator, Forlac replied, his black eyes fixed on Jean. She believes a small target is hard to hit. Let us test this theory. He turned his gaze to Min. Here are the terms. A simple demonstration. If your representative can last 1 minute in the ring with Kale without being incapacitated, we will agree to your joint security proposal. Furthermore, we will grant Earth a 20% more favorable exchange rate on the resource trade. The offer was incredibly generous. Too generous. It was a bait, and Min knew it. And if we lose? Min asked. His voice tight. Forlac's thin lips stretched into something like a smile. Then you concede to all our original terms on the resource allotment. No negotiations. And humanity will formally acknowledge Zorvac's martial superiority in your official historical records. A small price for a valuable lesson in reality. Min's mind raced. It was a terrible risk. The resource concession would be a huge loss for Earth. The formal acknowledgement of superiority would be a lasting shame. He looked at Jean. Her face was still calm, but her eyes were locked with Kale's. There was no fear in them. There was only a cool, focused assessment. She was not looking at a monster. She was looking at a problem to be solved. "Jean," Min said softly, stepping closer to her. "You don't have to do this. We can walk away. I can try to smooth this over diplomatically." Before Jean could answer, Kale took another step forward. The floor seemed to vibrate. "Do you fear for your pet, little man?" he rumbled, his eyes still on Jean. "She has a warrior's tongue. Does she not have a warrior's heart? Or are all human words empty?" The insult was aimed at both of them, at all of humanity. The Zorvax soldiers in the stands began to stomp their feet again, a slow, rhythmic pounding that filled the room. It was a sound of anticipation. They wanted to see the show. They wanted to see the loud little human put in her place. Jean finally broke her gaze from Kale and looked at Min. She saw the fear and worry in his face. She knew the stakes. She knew what she was risking. But she also knew something Min did not. She knew the look in Kale's eyes. It was the same look she had seen in countless bullies throughout her life and her career. It was the look of someone who had never truly been challenged. Someone who believed their power was absolute. That kind of arrogance created blind spots. And blind spots were where she worked best. She thought about the Zorvax's belief. Humans cannot fight unarmed. It was a lie they told themselves to feel superior. They had never seen Hapkido. They had never seen Aikido. They had never seen a Special Forces soldier who knew 100 ways to disable a larger opponent using only their own hands. She gave a single, sharp nod to Min. It was a small movement, but it was filled with certainty. Then she turned to Ambassador Forlac. "Agreed," she said. Her voice was clear and carried over the stomping feet. The stomping stopped instantly. A wave of excited chittering went through the crowd. Kale grinned, a terrifying sight full of sharp teeth. He cracked the knuckles on his good hand, the sound like small rocks breaking. "Excellent," Forlac hissed, his pleasure obvious. "The rules are simple. No weapons. The match ends when one participant yields, is knocked unconscious, or is otherwise unable to continue, or when 1 minute has passed. Do you require time to prepare?" Jean shook her head. "No. I am ready." Min felt a surge of panic. "Jean, at least change your clothes. You're wearing engineer's fatigues." Jean looked down at her simple, loose-fitting pants and tunic. They were comfortable and allowed for easy movement. That was all that mattered. "They are fine," she said. Kale let out another low laugh. He gestured to the center of the soft floor. "Come then, little creature. Let us see how easy this big target is to hit." Jean began to walk forward. Her steps were calm and steady. She did not march aggressively. She did not slink fearfully. She just walked, as if she were entering a room, not a fight for her species' pride. Min watched her go, his hands clenched into fists. He had never felt so helpless. He had brought his friend here to help with engineering reports, and now she was about to fight a mountain of muscle and anger. He could only stand and watch as Jean took her place on one side of the circle. Kale stood on the other, a giant of green flesh and grim confidence. The air in the amphitheater was electric with anticipation. The Zorvax were ready for a quick and brutal lesson. They believed they were about to see the galaxy's natural order confirmed. Min held his breath. The only thing he could do now was hope. Hope that his friend's quiet confidence was not a mask for a terrible mistake. Min followed Jean into a small, quiet room next to the amphitheater. The moment the door closed, his control broke. His diplomatic calm vanished, replaced by pure fear for his friend. "Jean, what did you just do?" he said, his voice loud and strained. "He's 3 times your size. His grip strength can crush Durasteel. I read the briefings. This isn't a fight. It's a public execution. This will be a diplomatic disaster." Jean was not listening in the way he wanted her to. She was standing in the middle of the room, rolling her shoulders and then her neck. She stretched her arms over her head, then began a series of slow, fluid stretches for her legs. Her movements were economical, practiced. She was conserving energy. "Jean, please, talk to me," Min pleaded. She finished a stretch and looked at him. Her eyes were calm, but there was a sharpness in them he had not seen in a long time. It was a look from her past. "Min, do you remember why I left Special Forces?" she asked, her voice even. It wasn't just the politics. It was the sheer, boring predictability of bullies. Min stared at her, confused. "What are you talking about? This is not the time for philosophy." "It is exactly the time," Jean said, bending forward to touch her toes. "Bullies, whether they are in a schoolyard or in a starship, all rely on the same thing. They rely on the expectation of fear. They show their power and they expect you to freeze. They expect you to submit. Their whole strategy is based on that one idea." She straightened up and began to rotate her wrists and ankles. Kale has never fought someone who wasn't afraid of him. He has never fought someone who did not believe in his power. He only understands one language, the language of force, and I am fluent in it. Min shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "But his force is so much greater than yours. How can you possibly?" "Force is not just about muscle," Jean interrupted. She held up her hand, fingers together and straight like a blade. "It is about focus. It is about direction." She pointed to the center of her own palm. "A push here does nothing." Then she moved her finger to the side of her wrist, pressing on a specific point. "But pressure here at the right angle with the right leverage can make the strongest arm fail. His size is his advantage, but it is also his weakness. He is slow. He is predictable. He thinks the fight is about his strength against mine. It is not." She looked toward the door that led back to the arena. "It is about his strength against his own balance, against his own momentum. They think humans can't fight unarmed." A small, cold smile touched her lips for the first time. "They've never heard of the body itself being the weapon. Every joint is a lock. Every limb is a lever. My mind is the key." Min looked at his friend. He saw the calm certainty on her face. He remembered the stories he had heard about her old life, stories she never told but he had pieced together. Stories of impossible situations and quiet, efficient solutions. He felt a flicker of hope, small but real. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice much quieter now. "I am sure of the theory," Jean said honestly. "The practice will be informative." There was a low chime from the door. It was time. Jean took a final, deep breath and let it out slowly. All the relaxation left her body. She was not tense, but she was ready. Every muscle was poised. Her mind was clear, focused only on the next few moments. She walked to the door. Min wanted to say something, to wish her luck, to tell her to be careful. But the words stuck in his throat. He just watched her go. Jean stepped out into the bright light of the amphitheater. The sound of the Zorvax crowd was a wave of noise that hit her. She ignored it. She did not look at the screaming soldiers. She did not look at the smug face of Ambassador Forlack. She only looked ahead, at the circle of soft floor. Kale was already there, waiting. He was shadowboxing, throwing slow, powerful punches through the air. Each punch made a whooshing sound. He saw her and stopped, a wide, predatory grin spreading across his face. He cracked his neck. Jean walked to her designated spot. She did not bounce on her feet like a boxer. She did not raise her fists high. She simply stood, her knees slightly bent, her weight balanced evenly on both feet. She held her hands open, relaxed, in front of her. She looked like she was waiting for a bus, not a fight. The contrast between them could not have been more extreme. On one side, a mountain of muscle, tense and aggressive. On the other, a small woman, calm and still. The Zorvax soldiers laughed and pointed. They saw her posture as proof of her weakness. They saw her as a lamb walking into a cage with a lion. Min watched from the edge of the circle, his heart pounding in his chest. He saw what the Zorvax saw, but he also saw what Jean had shown him in the preparation room. He saw the focus. He saw the readiness. She was not a lamb. She was a scalpel, sharp and precise. Waiting for the moment to cut, a loud tone echoed through the amphitheater. The match had begun. The sound that started the match faded away. The amphitheater was filled with a tense, excited silence. The Zorvax soldiers leaned forward, eager for the show to begin. They expected a quick and brutal display. Kale did not charge. He was not in a hurry. He wanted to draw out the moment, to savor the fear he was sure his opponent felt. He took a slow, heavy step forward. Then another. His eyes were locked on Jean, his grin wide and cruel. He was a hunter, and she was his prey. Jean did not move from her spot. Her posture remained relaxed, her hands open. Her eyes, however, were intensely focused. She was not looking at his face. She was watching his shoulders, his hips, the placement of his feet. She was reading his body like a book. He was going to grab her. It was the most obvious move for a creature of his size and pride. He would want to show his dominance immediately, to pick her up and crush her, to prove his strength was absolute. He took one more step, now within reach. Just as she predicted, his left hand, his massive three-fingered hand, shot out. It moved fast for its size, a blur of green flesh aimed directly at her throat. It was a classic Zorvax opening move, designed to intimidate and control, to show he owned the space around her. The soldiers in the crowd held their breath. This was the moment. The human would be caught, lifted, and the farce would be over. But Jean was not there to be caught. She did not jump back. She did not try to block the hand with her own, a useless effort against such power. Instead, she flowed forward, inside the arc of his swing. It was a small, subtle movement, like a dancer avoiding a partner. Her left arm came up, but not to block. Her hand touched the inside of his extending wrist, guiding it, redirecting its force just an inch to the side. It was a gentle touch, but it was perfectly timed. Kale's hand closed on empty air where her neck should have been. His fingers snapped shut with a sound like a rock breaking. The surprise was instant on his face. His attack had missed. In that same second, while his arm was still extended and his balance was slightly forward, Jin's right hand clamped over the back of his hand. Her fingers were not trying to grip his thick hide. Instead, they dug into specific points on his wrist, pressing hard into the complex structure of bones and tendons beneath. Kale felt a bizarre, sharp pressure. It was a wrongness in the alignment of his joint. His brain, trained for a lifetime of overpowering opponents, registered the threat a split second too late. His instinct was to pull back, to use his immense strength to yank his arm free, and then crush her with the other. He began to contract the massive muscles in his arm and shoulder. He put all his power into pulling his captured hand back toward his body. This was the mistake Jean was waiting for. She did not resist his pull. She used it. As he pulled back, she added her own force to his. She twisted her hips and shoulders, a swift, explosive motion. It was not a movement of her arms alone, but of her entire body, a coil of energy unspringing. She used his own backward momentum against him, locking his wrist and leveraging it beyond its natural range of motion. There was a sound. It was not a loud bang or a crash. It was a short, sharp, sickening crack. It was the sound of something hard and biological breaking under precise, unnatural stress. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Kale's eyes went wide. The grin vanished, replaced by a look of pure, uncomprehending shock. A low grunt escaped his lips. The terrible pressure in his wrist exploded into a white-hot fire of agony. His hand, now bent at a horrible, impossible angle, went completely limp. He roared. It was not a roar of anger, but of pain and disbelief. He stumbled back, clutching his ruined wrist against his chest. He stared at it, then at Jean, his face a mask of confusion and horror. The fight had lasted 6 seconds. He had not even managed to throw a single strike. The silence in the amphitheater was absolute. The Zorvax soldiers were frozen. Their mouths hung open. Their eyes were wide with disbelief. They had not seen a fight. They had seen a magic trick. One moment their champion was attacking. The next, he was broken and retreating, defeated by a touch. Jean stood her ground. She had returned to her ready stance, her hands open, her breathing even. She had not taken a single hard step. She had not thrown a punch. She had not even broken a sweat. She was calm, as if she had just finished tying her shoe. Min stared, his own mind struggling to process what he had just seen. He had seen the movement, but it was so fast, so efficient, that it barely looked like anything at all. It was not a brawl. It was a surgical procedure. One precise cut and the disease was removed. That he looked at Kale, the mighty champion, now hunched over and moaning, his mighty strength useless against the pain in his wrist. He looked at the stunned Zorvax crowd. Then he looked at Jean, standing small and serene in the center of the circle. The galaxy's definition of strength had just been rewritten. The silence in the amphitheater was deeper than before. It was a heavy, stunned silence, filled only by Kale's ragged breathing and his low groans of pain. He held his injured wrist, staring at the unnatural angle of his own hand. He looked from his hand to Jean and back again, his face a picture of shattered pride and confusion. He could not understand what had happened. The Zorvax soldiers in the stands were just as confused. They did not cheer. They did not boo. They simply stared. They had come to see a demonstration of ultimate power. They had seen their champion, their symbol of strength, defeated in a handful of seconds by a creature they considered physically pathetic. The event was too large for their minds to process. Their belief system had just received a crack. Ambassador Forlack was frozen. The smug, calculating look was gone from his scaly face. His silver skin had taken on a pale, ashen color. His black eyes were wide, fixed on his broken champion. He had gambled everything on a sure thing, and he had lost. He had not just lost a bet. He had lost the unshakable certainty of Zorvac's superiority. The human had not won by being stronger. She had won by being smarter. This was a concept they had never considered. Min was the first one to move. He took a deep breath, forcing the shock from his own system. He was a diplomat. This was his moment. He smoothed the front of his suit and walked to the center of the circle, stepping carefully around Kale, who was being attended by two stunned Zorvax medics. He stopped next to Jean, who finally relaxed her stance. She lowered her hands to her sides. She looked at Min and gave a small, almost invisible nod. Her job was done. Min turned to face Ambassador Forlack. His face was calm and polite, the perfect diplomatic mask. But his voice, when he spoke, was firm and carried a new weight. "It would seem, Ambassador," Min said, his words clear in the quiet room, "that your assessment of humanity was incomplete." Forlack flinched, his eyes flicking from Kale to Min. He had no words. His arguments about pure power and biological facts lay in ruins at his feet. Min continued, his tone not gloating, but stating a simple truth. "Humans do not just fight with tools we hold in our hands. We are the tools. Our minds are our greatest weapon. And we have spent thousands of years honing the rest of our bodies to be just as sharp. We call it technique. We call it leverage. You called it weakness. The results speak for themselves." He gestured toward Jean, who stood silently beside him. She was the living proof of his words. Small, unarmed, and utterly victorious, Forlack finally found his voice, though it was weaker now, a faint rustle. "This changes things," he admitted, the words seeming to pain him. "Yes, it does," Min agreed. He looked at the writhing form of Kale one more time, then back to Forlack. "Now, about that joint security proposal and the revised, more favorable resource exchange we agreed upon. Shall we return to the negotiation table to finalize the terms?" The message was clear. The demonstration was over. The wager was settled. It was time for the Zorvax to honor their word. Forlack gave a slow, defeated nod. He gestured for his aides to follow him. The Zorvax soldiers in the stands began to shuffle out quietly, their excited chittering replaced by a confused and humbled silence. Jean did not wait for them to leave. She had no interest in their shock or their shame. She had done what was necessary. She turned and began to walk out of the amphitheater. Her steps were as calm and steady as when she had entered. The Zorvax soldiers moved aside to let her pass. They did not look at her with contempt anymore. They looked at her with something new: caution, respect, and a little bit of fear. They had learned a lesson today that would be written in their own history books. The galaxy was a more dangerous place than they thought. Humans were not soft. They were not vulnerable. They were quiet, and they were patient, and they knew how to break the strongest arm without throwing a single punch. Min watched her go, a feeling of immense pride swelling in his chest. His friend, the quiet engineer, had just rewritten the relationship between humanity and one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. She had not just won a fight. She had won respect. The most dangerous human weapon was not a gun or a ship. It was the quiet woman walking away, the one you would never see coming.